Anna and Steve were together for almost 18 years and married for just over 16. They were both 39 years old, with Anna being 2 months older. They had two beautiful daughters from their marriage, Christina, 14 years old, and Bianca, 12 years old. They were small copies of Anna. It was clear who their mother was. Even at such a young age, they quickly caught up with their mother in height, and Christina was already beginning to develop a figure similar to her mother's. Naturally, this caused Bianca some dissatisfaction, since she also wanted breasts. "Patience, dear," Anna usually answered. Anna was 5'7" tall, with long sandy hair and hazel eyes. No one would ever say that she is not an attractive woman. She wore stylish clothes and had a gorgeous, full, feminine figure, the result of childbirth and regular exercise. Her breasts remained an impressively firm 36C, her waist was a slim 25 inches, and her hips were a beautifully rounded 37 inches. Long, slender legs topped with a firm but femininely rounded butt completed a very attractive figure. Many men have looked at Anna with admiration over the years, and she, like most women, has enjoyed the attention. Steve stood 6'2" tall and was still a strong and athletic man who exercised regularly to stay in shape. His light brown hair, blue eyes, and masculine appearance also attracted many female gazes. He was busy with his two daughters and their many activities and sports, and was a great supporter of their hobbies. Anna didn't want to leave her warm and loving position, but she knew her daughters would wake up soon, and she and Steve would have a lot to do. Anna was scheduled to fly out during the day for a 3-day training seminar that the company had sent her to. She was a middle manager, and a new computer management system was about to be installed, and Anna had to ensure that her department was prepared. This was a good opportunity for her to shine and probably get promoted if all went well. Being Sunday, the girls had football, fortunately on the same fields, so there was no need to run from place to place, as was often the case before. There was a thud somewhere in the house, and both parents chuckled, imagining Christina, who hated getting up in the morning, trying to get ready. With a groan, Steve freed himself from his sexy wife and went to the bathroom, despite her plaintive cries. The day went from slow, sensual, and loving to instant madness. Shower, food, clothes, sports equipment, run to the car and to the field. The two winds lifted everyone's spirits as the family got into the car and raced home. Anna was packed and ready to leave, so after quickly eating lunch, saying goodbye and grabbing her bags, Steve drove her to the airport. The passionate 5-minute kiss was interrupted when Anna had to go to the plane, otherwise she risked being late for the flight. "Do you think Mom suspects something, Dad?" Bianca asked with a smile when Steve finally returned. "No idea, honey," Steve replied with a big smile. "This is going to be so much fun. I can't wait to see her face when we surprise her," Christina continued. "Yes, this will be an amazing surprise. I can't wait to go to the resort. I want to go water skiing," Bianca exclaimed. "Well, I'm sure we'll do that and more, honey. Your mom deserves something memorable for her 40th birthday," Steve smiled. "Yeah, it's funny that she tried to make us promise not to do anything for her birthday just because she's turning 40. God, 40 is not old and Mom still looks great for any age. I hope I look just as good at her age," Christina smiled. Steve and the girls had been planning a short vacation for several weeks and even agreed with Anna's boss for an extra day off. Anna's flight went without incident and exactly on schedule. She landed as the sun was setting on the horizon and headed to the hotel. Quickly bringing her bag into the room, she went to the restaurant for dinner. She noticed a few familiar faces from other offices and struck up small conversations until everyone was gathered around the same table. They all knew there would be tiring days ahead, so the group decided to go to bed early to prepare for the workshop. The training seminar took place in one of the large conference rooms of the hotel where they were staying, so there was no need to rush anywhere in the morning. Anna slept well enough after a long and tiring day, the best moment of which, of course, was the beautiful love with Steve. After eating breakfast and quickly calling her family at home, Anna headed to the study hall. Grabbing her badge, she spent a few minutes chatting and getting to know some of the other managers from different branches around the country that she had never met before. A new manager caught her attention. His badge read, Paul. He was fit and quite handsome. During the day, Anna found that she enjoyed his company as they sat next to each other. Paul was 28 years old, had a fiancée, and was planning to marry his longtime girlfriend in 2 months. Paul was funny, charming, and he and Anna quickly hit it off. There were no sexual thoughts between them, they just became friends. Paul also noticed Anna and found her attractive, but did not plan anything sexual with the happily married mother of two. During the day, their communication was extremely pleasant. Mutual attraction did not lead to any action. Paul secretly glanced at the sexy older woman, which excited Anna. Brief touches and smiles intensified their mutual attraction. Monday's sessions ended and all participants breathed a sigh of relief. There was a ton of information to absorb, followed by a huge amount of handouts and papers. That evening, most of the 30 participants met at the hotel bar for a pre-dinner drink and continued networking. There were stories and laughter about various problems, both work and personal. Anna and Paul seemed drawn to each other and sat next to each other at dinner. There were playful touches and glances that enhanced their enjoyment of the interaction. Anna felt a rush of warmth and her breath caught in her throat as Paul's hand touched her leg several times during dinner. After dinner and another drink, Anna said goodbye and went back to her room to call her family. She was pleased to hear their joyful voices, and she felt a pang of guilt as she talked to Steve. She knew she shouldn't flirt with Paul, but it was harmless, isn't it? It was flattering that a young, attractive man was paying attention to her. She was frightened by the thought of her approaching 40th birthday, although no one would have thought that she was that old. She still looked like she was in her early 30s. In fact, Paul guessed her age at 32 years old, and she did not correct him, feeling a warm rush in her body at that moment. Tuesday and Wednesday went about the same for the participants. There was a lot of information to take in, which made the days stressful and long. Afterwards, everyone gathered again at the hotel bar and restaurant for dinner and drinks. Anna and Paul continued to flirt, becoming more comfortable with each other and, inevitably, more intimate. The excitement from these small touches, the closeness during conversations, the glances full of desire, all this intensified their growing attraction. Anna was the first to fall. On the last night before leaving, she dressed up to impress. She quickly ran to the store after the seminar and bought a tight, sexy dress that perfectly emphasized her figure. With a slight feeling of guilt, which was quickly suppressed by the excitement of her brash behavior, she bought a pack of 3 condoms. She hoped she had chosen the right size. Her 40th birthday was next week, and she was excited about flirting with a younger man. Why she bought the dress and condoms, she didn't even try to rationalize. She felt sexy and wanted to seduce and possibly sleep with an attractive young man. It was a flirtation, a fleeting connection to feel young and full of life again before turning 40. She had never even thought about something like this before and was sure that it would never happen again. She loved her husband and her family and would be devastated to lose them. She didn't even think about the risks and therefore the consequences, not considering them as an opportunity. Steve and the girls woke up very early Thursday morning to catch the 6:15 a.m. flight, which was the earliest. Christina, of course, hated it, but accepted the necessity under the circumstances. Steve booked a 3-night stay at a Sunshine Coast resort for the family as a surprise for Anna's birthday. Lounging by the pool, all the water activities, and spending time on the beach at a 5-star resort was something they all looked forward to. The plan was to arrive early and show up unexpectedly in Anna's room to surprise her before whisking her away for a fun time. They arrived at the hotel around 8:30 a.m. Christina slept through most of the hour-long flight, while Bianca was too excited to relax. After presenting his documents to the young woman at the reception, Steve received an additional key card for Anna's room. A very kind young woman allowed them to leave their bags in the back room until they returned. They crept into the room as quietly as possible, but Anna was not there. The bed was made, and they were confused. Bianca found a clothing store bag near the bed, and when Steve noticed an empty condom box in the bathroom trash can, his stomach turned. "I don't understand. Where is Mom?" asked Bianca. Christina was not as naive as her sister. She looked around the room, focusing on the made bed. She knew the cleaning service couldn't have been here this early, so it was clear that her mother had slept somewhere else the night before. They were all standing in the middle of a fairly large room when they heard quiet laughter and quiet conversations on the other side of the door. The door opened, and they saw Anna walking into the room with her back, with a man next to her. "You're restless. My God, you're insatiable." I said, "No more, okay? I'm already sore from last night and this morning. I need to get myself in order and get ready to go home to my husband." Anna playfully tried to push Paul away. Paul chuckled as he continued to grab Anna's butt. He then noticed something and froze, staring at the now ruined faces of the three people standing in the room behind Anna. Anna, thinking that she had done her job, easily pushed Paul out the door. "Thank you, Paul. You were wonderful. I will never forget these few days, but this must remain our secret, okay?" Paul simply turned around and quickly left. All he could think about was the faces of these people. He knew who they were. He and Anna had shared enough details about their lives over the past 3 days for it to be obvious. Returning to his room, which was only 4 doors away from Anna's, Paul closed the door and collapsed on the bed. "Oh my God," he thought, holding his head in his hands. "What have I done?" Meanwhile, Anna carefully closed the door and leaned her head against it, smilingly remembering yesterday's sex and this morning's. She took a deep breath and let her heart calm down a little. As soon as the pulsation in her ears subsided, she suddenly heard sobs and another one. She tensed and froze, her breathing stopping and her eyes widening as she slowly turned around. Her brain shut down as she looked into the eyes of her family and saw the destruction, disgust, and anger directed at her. Anna collapsed on the floor, screaming, tears streaming down her face. Christina and Bianca began to sob when they realized what they were seeing. Steve was almost catatonic, his brain trying to process the situation but failing. Almost on autopilot, Steve began to leave the room. He didn't even realize that his daughters were holding tightly to him for comfort and support. The three walked past Anna's limp body, stepping over her to get through. Anna, in her own personal hell, desperately reached for them, her left hand grabbing onto Steve's trousers. Steve stopped and slowly lowered his head and eyes to Anna's left hand, which was grabbing his leg. He stared for a moment, then grabbed her hand tightly to pull it away. He noticed that her wedding rings were missing and his pain increased. He looked at the exposed finger, then began to squeeze Anna's finger between his thumb and forefinger, his gaze becoming increasingly furious. Anna felt the pain, saw the anger, and realized that she was lost. Her marriage was over, and there was no turning back. She quickly assessed the evidence. A sexy new dress, no rings on her fingers, a box of condoms lying in plain sight on the carpet. And of course, the overheard conversation at the door about the night spent with her temporary lover, her little connection before her 40th birthday. She destroyed her family. The three of them hated her now. She will never be able to remove these images and knowledge from their memory. As they passed Paul's room, they heard the children sobbing. Paul felt a wave of guilt and disgust as he realized the consequences of his actions. He himself was going to marry the only woman he had ever truly loved. But now, was it still true? He became what he hated. A traitor. He saw what cheating did to his uncle's marriage. How it ruined such a good man. Now all he could see was that he seemed to have ruined another good man. How could he do what he did? And the family he just destroyed. These poor people, these poor children. He began to imagine himself in Steve's shoes, imagining himself standing in that room and Karen walking in with another man after a night with him. "Crap," he exclaimed. "I'll never be able to forgive myself," he thought as he felt tears streaming down his face as he looked at the floor in front of him. "How can I look at myself in the mirror? How can I look at Karen? Oh my God, Karen, I am so sorry. God, what should I do?" he asked himself, lying on the bed. On the bed itself, where he became the insignificance that he now recognized himself as. His heart was beating fast as the full realization of his selfish actions weighed heavily on him. His stomach twisted and turned as emotion and guilt washed over him. Three dejected souls sat at the airport, trying to comprehend what had happened while they waited for their flight. Steve decided that they would go to the resort, even if the trip was not at all what they expected. He decided that they needed some time away from home, knowing that Anna would probably head straight home. She didn't know where they would be, since the surprise was now on them. Anna lay on the floor, too exhausted to move for long. She had to go to the bathroom, and there she first noticed how she was dressed. She burst into tears again as she sat on the toilet, realizing that her family had seen her like this. The bitch she had allowed herself to become, who they now knew she was. They clearly saw all aspects of her betrayal in its full humiliating form. She packed and headed out. The receptionist at the front desk looked at her with a knowing look as she signed the bill for the room. When this woman's family arrived, they were so excited that they planned to surprise her with a birthday trip. But when they got downstairs, they were clearly upset and could barely contain themselves. Unfortunately, the receptionist knew what they must have found when they entered this woman's room. She had seen or known about such cases many times since she started working at the hotel. Why can't people be faithful anymore? He thought as he tried to put on a fake smile for the woman in front of him. Her face almost matched the expression of the young man who had checked out 20 minutes ago. Same floor, same training seminar. It doesn't take a genius to figure out what happened. Anna went home, trying to save her marriage. When she arrived, the house was empty. She had no idea where her family was. She couldn't believe she did what she did. She never thought that anyone would find out. It was a small affair, harmless sex with a young, handsome man. How did it all turn out so wrong? How could she get her family back? Where were they? She tried calling Steve, but it went to voicemail. The girls' phones were in their rooms, she discovered while wandering aimlessly around the house. She noticed that some things were missing from their closets and chests of drawers, but not enough that they would be missing for a long time. Did they get home before her and pack up for the night to stay away from her? And why were they in her room this morning? They didn't know what she was going to do. This was not planned. It was something she decided to do spontaneously. Could someone have seen her with Paul last night, a friend of Steve's, and called him? Of course not. So why? Why were they all in her room, waiting for her? It was pointless. If only. Unless they wanted to surprise her for her birthday. Oh God, that must have been it. She told them she didn't want to celebrate her 40th birthday. It would only make her feel old. That was a big part of the reason why she slept with Paul. She wanted to feel young, sexy, and wanted by someone other than Steve. What an idiot she was. Steve and the girls went to the resort. The mood was gloomy. Everyone was immersed in their own thoughts and pain. The girls were confused, angry, and upset. Steve was devastated by what he saw and now knew. Unfortunately, he looked at his daughters and could not help wondering if they were truly his blood relatives. How many times did Anna cheat on him? How many times? This isn't the first time she's been away for work over the years. Did she cheat every time she left? Did she have a regular lover, or was this just one of many? Was he insufficient as a lover, as a husband? Such questions constantly swirled in his exhausted mind. The anxiety he felt was reflected on the faces of his children as he tried to console them, although he himself was inconsolable at the moment. That's what cheating does. It destroys trust. She questions every action, every decision, every word that comes out of the mouth of the cheater. All this is now overshadowed. All this is now saturated with the pungent smell of deception and betrayal. The three tried to make the best of a very bad situation, but it was pointless. There was no fun in them. They swam, water skied, walked, and lay by the pool. Most of all, they talked and talked about what they knew and what the future now looked like. The girls accepted that their parents would divorce. Their father would never be able to forget, none of them would be able to, and forgiveness would be a long time coming, if at all. Steve tried to stop the girls from talking so harshly about their mother, but it was difficult after what they had seen and what they all knew was lost. What they thought was a stunningly happy and loving family was torn to pieces. The girls, especially Christina, had asked the tough questions Steve had asked himself many times over the past few days. Steve was grateful they never voiced it and hoped they never thought about his worst fear, that he wasn't their biological father. It would destroy them, and if it were true, it would destroy them all. For all he knew, he would have to find out. Not because it would affect how he treated his daughters, they were his, no matter the outcome. But the thought that some other man might come and claim them as his own made him feel physically ill every time he thought about it. For 4 days and 3 nights, while her family was away, Anna slowly went insane. She didn't know where they were, and she couldn't call anyone. How could she explain why they left, or why she didn't know where they were? She thought about calling her mother-in-law, but could not. She was lost in a sea of self-accusation and despair. All she did was cry and suffer, waiting for some sign, some hope that they hadn't abandoned her completely. Steve looked at his 2 beautiful daughters as they walked out of the airport terminal on Sunday afternoon and headed toward the long-term parking area. Their faces seemed to age by years in an instant. They had all had to face a lot of truths over the past 4 days. Life as they knew it was forever and irreversibly changed. The girls confirmed that they did not want to live with their mother. The pain was too fresh for everyone, and just looking at her mother was to relieve certain aspects of that pain. When they arrived at the house that was no longer a home, the 3 sat quietly in the open garage, the tension palpable. Anna's car was still there, and they expected the sound of the garage door opening to attract her attention, so they sat and waited in silence to see if she would appear. With a deep, tense sigh, Steve took the first step to get out of the car when Anna didn't appear. Maybe she wasn't home, was the common sad thought at that moment. Steve and the girls grabbed their bags and headed into the house. They talked about it and tried to prepare themselves for the first time they would see Anna again, but the reality was much more emotionally charged than they could have predicted. It was a strange feeling, the tension was growing, as if they were preparing to defend themselves against an attacker. Their eyes darted around, first in the kitchen, then in the dining room, and finally in the living room as they entered, each wary. The house was silent, as were they, as they made their way to their bedrooms. They noticed that the door to their parents' bedroom was closed. All 3 stopped and stared at it. Steve opened the door and saw a lump under the bedclothes, correctly guessing that it was Anna. After throwing their bags into the girls' bedrooms, the 3 returned to the kitchen to think about the situation. The girls held their father's hands, finding support in each other. It was a terrible time for them, and they knew things would only get worse. Finally, Steve looked at what was in the refrigerator and pantry for dinner and realized that nothing had been added since they left on Thursday morning. He wasn't in the mood to cook, knowing that Anna was in their bedroom. He could no longer call her his. His enormous doubts and uncertainty about Anna's fidelity destroyed his trust. Now, everywhere he looked in the house, there was a place where Anna could sleep with someone else behind his back. He looked at the dining table. "Girls, let's go get dinner," he said sadly. They returned to the car and drove off, with no clear direction in mind. Anna stirred, and her eyes opened. Did she hear something? Now she was no longer sure. She had lost hope by this point and was now just existing. Dragging herself out of bed, she headed to the kitchen. She had eaten almost nothing for the past 4 days, subsisting mostly on strong black coffee. Her phone rang several times, but since it wasn't Steve, she let the calls go to voicemail. Walking past her daughter's rooms, she suddenly stopped. There were bags in their rooms. She was shocked, delighted, and afraid. Her pulse jumped and her breathing became heavy as she moved further down the corridor. She noticed Steve's bag in the guest bedroom and began to cry at the realization. Trying to control herself, she walked through the living room into the dining room and finally stopped in the kitchen. There weren't any. Anna sat down on the kitchen chair and cried as she felt the pain she had been experiencing for the last few days again. An hour later, Anna heard the garage door open. She sat tense and expectant as her family entered. What will they say or do? What will she say or do? She managed to compose herself a little, knowing that they were back, and hoped that they would come back in again soon. Christina was the first to come through the door and stopped in her tracks as Bianca crashed into her with a squeal. They both just stared at their mother with tense faces and furrowed brows, their breathing ragged and strained. By this time, Steve had walked up behind them, and the four just stared at each other for a few moments. Anna began to cry and stood up from her seat to go to her family. "No need," Christina almost hissed, forcing Anna to stop. Her face contorted and she screamed, collapsing to the floor, looking into the dead eyes of her daughters. In a scene all too reminiscent of Thursday morning when they first discovered her betrayal, Anna sat sobbing on the floor, desperately begging for forgiveness and comfort through her agonizing sobs, reaching out to her family. Nobody responded. Her family walked past her again and headed to the guest bedroom, closing the door behind them. Steve noticed with some disgust that she now had wedding rings on her fingers again. "It's too late for that, you changeling creature," he thought. Anna sat in despair on the floor for a long time. No one checked on her, and she had never felt more alone in her life. Self-pity was on her mind as she struggled with the realization of what she had done to herself and her family. The pain of realizing the destruction she had caused to her once amazing family was almost unbearable, and there was still a lot of pain ahead. Extended family and friends did not yet know what she had done. They would all be terrified, but no more than she was now in herself. She knew that she had thrown everything away for a fleeting romance with a younger man because she felt old. "So how do you feel now, you stupid bitch?" she asked herself, crying again from the agony of loss that was now completely clear. Steve and Bianca sat cuddled on the bed in the guest bedroom, once again lost in thought and pain, while Christina paced back and forth, becoming increasingly irritated. "Grandma, you need to come to the house right now," Steve suddenly heard Christina say. He looked and saw Christina talking on the phone and asked what she was doing. "Someone should be with Mom," she said. "I hate her and I don't want to deal with her. And you?" Steve nodded in agreement and accepted that his mother-in-law would arrive in 20 minutes. He thought that this was not the best option and wished that Christina would not be so impulsive, but this had already been done and needed to be addressed. When they heard the doorbell ring, they all left the bedroom and headed to the living room. Anna was still in the kitchen and at least now sat down on a chair. She stared blankly at the glass of water in front of her, not noticing their presence as they passed by. Steve opened the door to a worried Cora Ambrose, Anna's mother, and Larry Ambrose, her father, standing behind him with furrowed brows. "What's going on, Steve?" she asked, quickly entering. "That call from Christina was so short that it made me nervous. Is Anna okay? Are the children okay? What's happened? Why do you all look so upset?" she finished, looking at the three standing in front of her. Steve accepted the fact that he would have to deal with the situation, which, in a sense, he had hoped to avoid forever. Taking a deep breath, he sighed slowly and sadly. He looked at Bianca's scared face and Christina's much angrier, tougher face before he began. "Cora, Anna is in the kitchen. Maybe you should go see her for a few minutes before we continue," Steve suggested. Cora was concerned, but also puzzled why her two granddaughters were not with their mother. They seemed to be holding close to their father, and they were all in some kind of emotional state. It was visible on their faces. She knew she wouldn't like what she saw and heard as she headed into the kitchen. Larry Ambrose was a quiet man who always listened more than he talked, always looked and really saw what was in front of him before he acted. What he had seen and heard so far was very disturbing. His son-in-law was tired and depressed. His beautiful granddaughters were exhausted and on the verge of an emotional breakdown. Whatever happened, it destroyed them. He feared the worst: cancer, disease, or what he didn't want to consider, infidelity. Cora stopped and stared at her daughter sitting at the table in front of her. Anna's liveliness disappeared. Her once serene and cheerful demeanor was shattered by pain and despair as she now looked at her mother. Anna stood up and, seeing her mother's open arms, quickly moved to fall into the loving embrace. A hug she wasn't sure she'd get again after her arrogance and stupidity were exposed. She sobbed in her mother's arms, bursting into loud sobs of pain. Larry sat quietly with Steve and the girls in the living room, listening to his daughter pour out her heart. He wanted to go to his daughter, but he also wanted to see her family's reaction. Larry studied them again as they huddled close together for support and comfort, their eyes empty and devoid of any real emotion. This is very bad, he thought. None of them even tried to go to Anna, and other than perhaps a malicious grin from Christina, there was nothing there. What did she do to them? God, not cheating. Not Anna, please. Anna finally began to calm down as her mother moved her back to the chair she had been sitting on. Pulling up another chair nearby, Cora sat down and hugged her daughter, trying to calm her down. "It's okay, baby. I'm here. Your dad is here. Your family is here. Whatever happens, we are all here, and we will get through it. We all love you," Cora said softly. For the next few minutes, the house was filled with the sounds of Anna's agony, her sincere belief that her family did not love her, causing her to burst into another bout of crying. Larry could no longer hold back and went to his wife and daughter to support them both. His fear was evident on his face as he looked into the sad eyes of his wife of over 40 years. They both knew that no matter what happened, Anna was the only reason, and it may have destroyed her family. It took a long time, with several breaks for crying, but Anna finally explained what happened at the conference. By this time, the whole family was sitting at the kitchen table. Cora and Larry were more shocked than they had ever been in their lives. Anna sobbed and begged for forgiveness at the same time. Steve and Christina were almost indifferent, while Bianca clung to her father and cried into his chest. Steve's emotions felt dead. He felt no sympathy for Anna's pain, no desire to console the woman he once loved. Yes, he understood, he didn't love her anymore. Some say you can't just turn off love, no matter what happens. Well, Steve realized he could. From the highest peaks that his love had once been, all that remained was despair and disgust, which now ruled his emotions. Anna threw him off the cliff in the worst possible way. He was once safe, confident, and happy. The love of his family, and the love he felt for his family, was unshakable and impenetrable, or so he thought. The absolute betrayal she committed destroyed his soul. There were no excuses that could explain it, no twisted, selfish rationalizations that could justify it. The marriage was over. It was that simple. He had a few days to think and agonize. Days spent in an endless parade of thoughts and emotions, trying to find even a spark of hope for myself, for the sake of my precious daughters. His daughter. Yes, no matter what, they were his. He would fight the world to keep them, regardless of the outcome of any test. Did he want these tests? Did he want to know? Do girls need this knowledge? Damn you, Anna. Of course, the last few days could have been spent much better, especially for the girls, but they saw it all, personally and simultaneously with him. He could barely keep his own mind straight, let alone be composed enough to deal with his daughter's emotions. God, what a mess. Anna spent almost the next hour begging her family for forgiveness, for a second chance. It was a mistake. She felt old and unattractive. She was seduced. It meant nothing to her. It was just sex, just an affair. They could get over it and be happy again like before. And this continued until Anna made her last, fatal mistake. Think about the kids, Steve. They don't deserve to live in a broken home. You can't do this to them. Steve was on the verge of boiling by this time, listening to her excuses from the Cheater's Handbook, apparently sold in all major bookstores since it sounded so cliched. He quickly stood up and simply looked at Anna with contempt. You made it. You caused all this. You betrayed me, betrayed the girls, betrayed the us. For what, Anna? For what? To feel younger, more attractive to other men, younger than men? Well, congratulations. We're done. You can have all the young men you want and feel young because of them. Your pathetic excuses disgust me. You disgust me. Cora, Larry, please take your daughter home. I'll see the lawyer tomorrow morning. Everything is over. Anna collapsed, screaming, "No," when Steve's words hit her. She watched him leave the kitchen, followed by Christina with a scornful smile. Poor Bianca just sat and clung to her grandmother, sobbing. Everyone except Anna knew that this decision was inevitable, but it was still difficult for everyone. Anna was eventually helped to her parents' car. Cora and a crying Bianca packed several bags of clothes for Anna. Larry worried that Anna was having a nervous breakdown as she sat in the back seat, mumbling and constantly shaking her head. He tried to persuade Steve, but knew it was useless. He couldn't accept his daughter's behavior in any way, so he had no sincere hope of changing Steve's mind, but he made a token attempt. As expected, Steve met with a lawyer the following week and filed for divorce. He applied for sole custody and received it without any resistance from Anna. She knew the girls were devastated by her actions, and Christina didn't particularly want to talk to her. She had no intention of forcing them to live with her. She lost that right through her actions. The division of property was close to $7,030 in Steve's favor. He left the house and took on the mortgage, while Anna moved in with her parents, needing at least some support. Anna remained at work, and her salary was seized to pay child support. Steve needed help caring for the girls due to his work hours. Anna cried at first when Cora was asked to be at Steve's house when the girls came home. She knew they didn't want it to be her, even if she could take a vacation from work. After all this happened, all four of them needed counseling for some time. Anne could never truly understand, let alone justify even to herself, why she did what she did. Steve and the girls saw a good therapist for several months, whose efforts reduced the pain and made the transition into a dysfunctional family more bearable. It was especially difficult for the girls to relive the memories of their mother from that hotel room. Anne was given reasonable access, but it was at the whim of her daughters. At first, they didn't really want to see or talk to her. The pain and memories were too fresh. Over time, Bianca softened the first one, but Christina lasted much, much longer. It took several sessions together with the therapist and her mother to calm the pain enough for at least some dialogue. Steve had no interest in ever seeing Anne again and only communicated via email when necessary regarding the girls. He held on to the pain of loss for much longer. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think, click to the next one. Click to the next one. Click